there's this general sentiment that's definitely on the rise, that things are like far worse right now than they were 10, 15, 20, name X number of years. People will say things have gotten worse. Whether this sentiment has any merit to it, it could be a whole paint and talk in its own right, but the fact of the matter is, you'd be hard pressed to find people that say like the world is on the right track right now. People usually got something to complain about in one direction or another. And with this sentiment rising, there comes a very big, not movement, but this like mass desire for an answer of like, if only statements. If only people were kinder. If only people were a little bit nicer, everything would be fixed. If only they would stop doing that. If only these group of people would stop doing that, especially if it's something that's more politically charged. It's like, only if that side stops doing what I don't like. And then if I'm on the other side, it's like, only if that side stops doing what I don't like. It's always something, and I tend to personally disagree with the entire basis of this desire that's on the rise. I don't think that the problems in the world can be solved with an if-only statement. But with that being said, if I were to make one, if I were to come up with one that I think would really fix a lot of things, it'd be an if-only statement of empathy, right? And I'm using empathy here as a blanket terms. I so often find myself doing these paint and talks for any sort of resonation with people going through something else. If back to that example of people politically, if you're on X side having some empathy and trying to see the perspective of the people on Y side, and when something like this gets brought up, when you say something like that, usually the answer right off the bat is, people on that side are so unreasonable, I can't even see it anymore. I can't even understand their perspective. And it's like, yeah, you can. See, this is exactly what I mean, is this idea that, people that don't agree with you, or just people in general, are out there that have such a vastly different perspective than yours, is, I think, a really damaging thing. Something that comes along with me saying that we need more empathy, that we need to understand the people's perspective on the other side of the fence a little bit more, is kind of this acknowledgement that, like, you have way more in common with everyone you interact with than you could ever imagine. Like, people think that we are more divided than ever, that we have different, whole lives going on, that, like, we can't even comprehend the way that people are living and the way things are going on anymore. And I just don't think that's true. I think if you took a second to really, really try and sit and understand where people are coming from, everyone would understand that, like, everything makes sense if you just put it in the other person's shoes. Now, of course, with this would come a whole other conversation of, well, how do you get everyone's shoes to match so we can agree on an answer, so we can actually fix the problems that most of us agree the world's going through? I don't know. I don't have that answer, but I do think that having just this sense of empathy would be a really good start. Oftentimes people, when I, bring this conversation up, they'll say it's moral relativism, that you shouldn't see both sides of a coin this intensely, that it's damaging, and that you should have a principled stance, and that you should remain firm in your convictions. And to that I say that I think it's very possible to stay firm in your convictions and believe a certain thing while having a relative stance, while having this degree of empathy. Because let's say you do want to stand firm in these convictions, something that I'm personally interested in. I would like to stand firm in my convictions, right? How can I get other people to join me in my convictions if I can't understand why they have theirs? And that all starts with empathy. That all starts with perspective. Again, I'm using empathy as a very blanket term here for understanding perspective. But there's also a sense in which I mean this, like, extremely literally. Something I see a lot living here in New York is a very, I might have spoken about this before, a very visceral reaction to homeless people, right? People have this really bizarre, I would go as far as just calling an ugly reaction to homeless people. And it's really strange. It's really disheartening to see. I want to say, just right off the bat, do homeless people do crime? Are homeless people angry? And, are they the nicest people ever? No, not at all. I'm not even going to sit here and try and argue that. But you wouldn't be either if you were in that situation. And I think understanding that is extremely, extremely important. You can always tell who someone really is when they come to New York and when you see their reaction to the homeless people. And I'm not saying that everyone has to, get on their hands and knees and like get them a warm cup of chili and, be the nicest guy on earth to them. I live here. I walk by them all the time. You know what I mean? It's not really a sense of you have to cater to them. More so just this idea that people are genuinely repulsed when they see them. I've been in the city with people, and when a homeless person comes up to them, they are like, ew, why are they coming up to me? Having these just really gross reactions. And it's like, you are like really close to that. You are, unless you are rich, you could be one of them. You could be homeless, and you could end up in that situation. You could be on the streets in the exact same way that they are, and people would be showing you the exact same attitude. And I feel like having that recognition, people of a middle class background, which is, what I am and what I'm going to guess that a lot of people watching this video are. I think that a lot of internet usage is a lot of middle class people. They tend to have this weird conception that like they are really far from poverty. Like they look at guys on the news like Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and they look at them and they go, oh, like I have more in common with him than the guy on the street. And I think some of this comes out of a very, natural inclination of like, I look more like them, you know what I mean? I put on a suit and go to work just like them. Whereas, the guy on the street is, he looks homeless. You know what I mean? I think it's it makes sense to an extent. But I want, a lot of people to really think about this more and understand that like, you don't have more in common with them. You have the same level of general instability. I mean, statistically speaking, at least, I think most Americans only have like, it's like what, $5,000 in savings, especially, younger people. If you're starting, you have a lot less than that. And like, what happens when you have nowhere to go when you end up in that scenario? What happens when you lose your job because you don't have that much job stability? No one does anymore. And it's like, I'm not saying this out of some sort of like, oh my God, I'm not trying to be a jerk about it, but I think that having these acknowledgments of like, I need to treat these people better. I need to understand their perspective. I need to just change your viewpoint on how you deal with people, how you look at people, because when, you capitulate to this framing that there is a homeless issue and that you are so far removed from it, and that like, this is another thing actually, small rant, like a lot of people refer to homelessness as like an issue right now going on of like, oh, the homeless people are an issue. There's they're violent, they're being, crazy on the streets. And again, I'm not going to sit here and act like these things don't happen, but it's strange that we are okay with this idea that the issue is how the homeless people are acting, and not the fact that like, isn't it strange that we have that going on, that we have that many homeless people out in all of our major cities? Like, shouldn't we be like, that's a real issue? Why is this going on? Why do we have all these resources to make iPhones and be the most technologically advanced ever, but we have more homeless people than 50 years ago? Like, I feel like that's the issue that we should see the news talking about. That should be the hot debated issue. Not, how do we get these guys to be quiet? And that's another thing of like a lack of empathy. Because it seems small, right? And I'm using homeless people here as a very literal example, one, but also they are more of a, blanket example too, because this is how it is with everyone. In America right now, there's a large debate about illegal immigration, right? And I'm not going to go into stances on that. I'm not going to talk about that too much, but I will say that the way that people are okay with speaking about the issue itself is really interesting, because you can tell that people don't view them as, to put it plainly, they don't view them as people. And I don't even want to say that it's just immigrants or homeless people. It's everyone. People don't view each other as people quite like they used to. And I think having, that's why I say an empathy would be an amazing start to dealing with this, because, when you see someone's side a little bit less, when you think that people are more violent than they really are, when it can be as simple as you not speaking to people, when you've never spoken to an immigrant or a homeless person, and you start to take on this framing that they are some sort of other, that they are not just, I will say, like, imagine yourself as someone who had to flee a country and come to another country legally. Imagine yourself now as someone who lost their job and you're living on the streets trying to survive, right? Imagine yourself in either of these two scenarios. That's like indefinitely more close to how the random guy on the street acts, or how the average immigrant acts. It's all so much simpler, I think, than people want to make it out to be. There's no huge other that you need to be scared of. All these people are just people. And at the end of the day, they want the same things as you, and they cannot get them because of, failings going on around us. And by you, as someone with, not having enough empathy, refusing to recognize that, by you going like, oh no, they must be vastly different, all you're really doing is perpetuating the problem. Because now you have the one very, material, real side of things of like, oh, like there's, a flaw in the system. It's interesting because that's almost the side that we can all agree on, right? If you go like, oh, there's something very wrong with the fact that there's so many homeless people, 99% of guys will agree with you. They'll be like, no, there is something wrong. We should work on that, right? Or if you say, oh, like, why is it illegal to cross an invisible line? You know what I mean? A lot of people agree with that too. I think I saw polling that like more people agree with that than not. These are very simple facts that like I think a lot of people can get their head around, that they can really agree with. But then for some reason, when it comes to genuinely like discussing it and interacting with any of these groups, with any of these people on a day-to-day basis, like in the real world, people lose all the empathy or all the, they lose all that charitability and understanding they had when they were discussing the issue. And now it's all, transitioned back into like, oh, this person is strange, I need to be careful. When the reality is, obviously be careful no matter who you're around, no matter what group they fall into. You should be careful out in the real world. But the reality is like, you're gonna be fine. Nothing is as crazy as it seems. And everyone is just, they're all humans like you, and even down to the fact that when you say they're all humans, everyone agrees. They go, no, of course, they're all humans, but they don't act like it. They act like they're these, these groups out in society, whether they're a marginalized group or even as simple as someone who has a different stance on an issue than you. People act like, oh no, they're a monolith, or they're this giant mass that don't see things right, And this is one of the reasons why, like, I talk about things from an internet lens very much here on Paint and Talk because, the series is on the internet. I think it makes sense. But, this is something that has creeped into the real world too, which is funny because, like, it's so important to go out and talk to people. Because the more you talk to people, whether it's simple as someone you have a disagreement with, or as large as, a guy on the street asking you for money, it's so important because then you really start to realize like, oh wait, they have the same interests as me, they have the same desires as me, they're just in a place where it hasn't been granted quite like mine has, and that's why I have these ideas about them that I really shouldn't have. Or, they understand the same ideas about me, about the world, that they want freedom, they want these things that we can agree are good, we just have a different way of getting to that solution. And once you start to see things less in terms of black and white and more in terms of like, what you want, and we're all humans trying to find it, that's what I mean by empathy, that's what I mean by relating. Once you can get to that level, I think that's the first thing we need to fix a lot of the issues that we're all dealing with here, Anyways, the painting is finished. I wanted to paint what the emotion of empathy felt like to me, and so I'm gonna try something. I wanted more yellow in here, so I'm gonna try and just do a yellow circle here maybe. Okay, that's working a little bit. I just wanted the core to be a little bit brighter. Either way, though, it came out pretty good. I think it, makes some sense to me. It's fairly straightforward, but you guys know the drill. Go check this out over on the Instagram. And hope you enjoyed today's discussion about empathy. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. And until next time, guys, gals, and pals, this has been Paint and Talk episode 42. I'm here every morning at 9 a.m. New York time, painting and talking with you all. Catch you tomorrow. Yeah.